Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for helping on. My name is Ransom Nyema. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. If you're new, thank you so much for helping on. Like I said, my name is Ransom Nyema. I'm a radiography medical student, my fourth year, based in Nigeria. And apart from my studies in education, I'm also a proficient medical writer and I also own a podcast on YouTube. So today I have an amazing guest speaker. Her name is Megan, all the way from the UK. Hey, Megan, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Megan. I've just finished my fifth year at medical school after intercalating in a bachelor's degree in genomic science, and I'll be going back into my final year of medical school in September, ready to start as a junior doctor in the UK.
Amazing, amazing. So talk us through how was your exams thus far?
Yeah, so I've just finished my exams. They've been really good. It's been a mixture mainly of essays and short answer questions. So it's a little bit different to examinations for medicine in the UK, which are mainly multiple choice. So it's been a nice challenge, but I'm ready to enjoy the summer now for sure.
All right. So thank you so much for introducing yourself, Megan. So we have a couple of questions for you to answer. You ready?
Yeah,
All right. So I see you study at Cardiff School of Medicine, right?
yeah, that's correct.
So that draws me to the first question. But before I ask you the question, could you talk us through about your school? Tell us how is your school going for you?
Yeah, so I'm at Cardiff at the moment and have been since 2019. For those not from the UK, Cardiff's capital city of Wales, so um, within the UK, but just sort of external to England. And yeah, it's been a really good school. I really enjoy it because we get to do placements all across the country rather than focused in one town or one city. So yeah, overall, it's been a really good. Um, Medical school, and I've really enjoyed both doing my normal medical studies and intercalating there as well.
Mm, mm, mm. Amazing, amazing. So that draws me to the first question. So can you explain the process of intercalating and how it enhances your medical education at Cardiff School of Medicine? Tell us.
Yeah, so I finished my fourth year of medical school and then decided I wanted to intercalate after that to just explore further areas of medicine. So, as I said, I have intercalated now in genomic medicine. So, that's looking at things like DNA and how that interacts with the drugs we take or how we develop certain conditions in our lives. So, for me, that was something that was really lacking in the medical school curriculum in the UK. It's something we don't really cover. However, in the next 10, 20 years, it's going to be a massive part of medicine, which comes into everything from prescribing to rare disease. And it's starting to slowly infiltrate every speciality. So for me, the process involved um, sending off like a personal statement, similar to sort of a CV, to my medical school to sort of show my interests and why I wanted to study the topic. So for me, I've wanted to do something genomic related since 2019. When I was in school, I did projects on genetics and genomics, and it was always an area that fascinated me. And as I said, I don't think the medical curriculum was really fulfilling those needs very well in the UK because it's such a niche specialty. So I decided I was going to do the course sort of early on in my fourth year. And then, as I say, sent off an application to my medical school. Luckily, it was one of the courses that they ran anyway, so I didn't have to look at other universities. And then they were able to read my application, see my passion for the subject, and luckily, I got accepted to start in September 2023. So overall, the process was quite seamless, luckily. And I feel like it has enhanced my time at medical school for lots of different reasons. It's been really nice to take a year away from the main medical course and focus on something very specific that you don't get to learn otherwise. Um, and really understand an area of medicine that's just going to get bigger and bigger as the years go by.
Hmm, amazing. Thank you so much for talking us through about how your process of intercalating and how it enhances your medical education, at Cardiff School of Basic Medicine. So to get you correct, is your specialization in medicine genetics?
So it's something I've done a bachelor's degree in now, so I've taken 1 year away to do a bachelor's. However, when I become a junior doctor, once I finish my medical school, I could then go on to specialise in anything. It doesn't have to be genetics, or genomics, it could be anything, but I've just now got that background knowledge at a bachelor's level of that area, which I think has really helped open up my eyes to, clinical genetics as a specialty, but I'm not locked in at this stage.
Okay, so before I move forward to the second question, could you talk us through how your knowledge in genetics during your bachelor's degree help you right now in medicine? Could you talk us through about that?
Yeah, um, when I go back in September, I hope this will be the case. But I think that the genetics will really help because there are so many conditions that we do learn about in the medical curricula where actually having that basic knowledge of genetics is really helpful. Probably the biggest example is, for example, cancer. Um, at its core, cancer is a genetic disease. It comes from, mutations that develop in our genome. So, I think having a better understanding of genetics has really helped me understand how cancer comes about, which is an area I'm potentially interested in. And I think as well, there are lots of areas of medicine that you don't realize actually have quite a bit of genetic link. So, for example, cardiology. I was learning about how, say, different diseases to do with the aorta and the heart have genetic links and can be caused by genetic conditions. The same with psychiatry as well, and also how we can use genetics in things like pathogen genetics. So, seeing how viruses change over time, which was obviously very prevalently used in the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I think as I go back into medicine, I'm going to have a greater appreciation of how we use genetics in all those different ways and how it's only going to continue to develop over time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think genetics is really an amazing specialty, in medicine, because it's all round, unlike radiography, radiography is also the eye of medicine, but genetics is really amazing. It's really amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us, Megan. So the second question goes this way. So what unique opportunities or experiences have you gained through intercalating, you know, at Cardiff School of Medicine that you wouldn't have had otherwise? So tell us the experience you gathered during your intercalation at Cardiff School of Basic Medicine. So tell us.
Yeah, so I think probably the main experience that I wouldn't have had otherwise is probably the experience to go in the lab and work and do some lab work. Um, that was something that we sort of do in the UK, maybe in the early years of med school, maybe year one and year two. Learning the basics, say how to use a pipette. But it's something that's touched on very fleetingly. You never really use it again, unfortunately. So those sort of lab skills, if you then want to go into research in the future, it can be hard to pick up. So I found it very beneficial to have a lab based research project this year, which meant that I got used to more technical skills in the lab, such as performing PCR reactions, pipetting, using assays. That was really useful. And it also helped to bring the genetics to life. Genetics, because it's obviously working on such a small level, we're talking, you know, micro sort of measurements, because you're in a lab, it feels like you're actually engaging with the science a lot more, which I found really beneficial. And working with a team in the lab as well was a really, really useful and unforgettable experience. Um, I would also say, in terms of opportunities, I've also had the opportunity to learn about different assessments. As I alluded to before, normally in medicine in the UK, we have sort of what's called single best answer or multiple choice type questions for our examinations, but we don't really get any of those sort of long answer or short answer written assessments. But they're things that we're going to need to do later on in our careers. So I actually found that getting used to writing essays again, which I hadn't done since school, was actually really useful, so that I'm not just used to having single best answer questions for everything. So having that extra opportunity to do essays is really good.
Indeed, you learn a lot during your intercalation, at Cardiff School of Basic Medicine, and so before I ask you the third question, I'm a bit confused about something. What is the difference between essays and dissertations?
So essays can just sort of be any long piece of work. So for example, in my exams, I had to write essays. Um, they're just generally sort of longer, sort of pages worth of work. Whereas a dissertation is a very specific project that we do in a sort of non-medicine capacity. It's normally done in the third year of a bachelor's degree or a master's level. It's a very long piece of work based on sort of one project that you've done, where an essay could be in anything, which could come in exams or other assessments.
Mm, thank you so much for clarifying that, the difference between, you know, essays and dissertations. So thank you so much for sharing that. So the third question goes this way: how does intercalating impact your career goals and aspirations within the medical field? To tell us.
Yeah, so as I alluded to before, I've got an interest potentially in oncology, and so doing an integration in genomic medicine helped me to get a better understanding of how there's a big interplay between oncology and genetics. There's a lot of testing that goes on, such as DPD testing, that has a genetic basis, but if you don't realize that, you could completely miss it. And just getting a better understanding of how cancer develops. So actually doing genomic medicine has potentially well, it definitely has increased my sort of awareness of oncology as a potential career, as well as clinical genetics. So in the UK, there's a whole speciality around genetics, both in terms of rare disease, so where very few people have a variant in their DNA which has caused a disease, or looking at patients where if they have cancer, it may be due to a sort of germline or familial cause that's being passed on that they can have checked. So both within clinical genetics, you have sort of cancer genetics and rare disease. And that's something I just didn't appreciate at all before intercalating, because I know at my medical school, and I'm sure it's the case for many across the UK, we just don't have any time in clinical genetics because it's such a niche specialty. So it's definitely piqued my interest in potentially going into clinical genetics in the future, especially cancer genomics, which is something I never felt I had enough information on to make a decision about.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Megan. So I want to, before I move to the fourth question, do you think that you you've had some varieties of career goals and aspirations in oncology and genetics and everything. So, how do you intend to choose a specialty that you think that works for you? Because you've done a lot of varieties of works on different specialties. So, how do you know that this is the one that my heart is, and this is the specialty I want to go into?
I think for me, that's a decision that I'm going to continue to make over time. So, I think one of the best ways, I think for me, that I'll decide what specialty I want to go into is what I get placed in my sort of junior doctor years in the UK, because that's the only way you're going to know what the day to day life of being a doctor in those specialties are. I've been really lucky to observe clinics in clinical genetics, both in the rare disease side and the cancer genetics side. So, I have got a little taster of what those are, and they're really interesting. But I'm not going to know what the day to day is until I'm trying it. So when I apply for my foundation years, I'm going to try and select jobs which have either oncology or clinical genetics as a rotation. Unfortunately, both of those can be quite rare in rotations, so I may not be able to experience them in my first 2 years as a doctor. But just trying to get as much experience as possible once I'm qualified, I think will be the best way to determine which is a long-term career goal, taking into everything into account, what I enjoy, what's compatible with the lifestyle that I want in the future, and what brings me the most joy. So yeah, it won't be a decision soon, but definitely in the future.
Amazing, amazing. So that draws me to the fourth question for you. Are you ready for that fourth question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Hmm. It's a bit tricky. That's why I asked you that question. You ready? Are
Yeah.
you sure?
Yeah, no, of course.
All right. So could you share any insights on research findings, from your intercalation project you've done that have practical applications in healthcare?
Yeah,
So
of
what do you
course.
have to?
Yeah, so this year I completed a dissertation which looked into how telomeres, so the structures at the end of chromosomes which protect the coding parts of DNA, how they are maintained in a specific cancer known as glioblastoma. So it's a type of primary brain cancer. Um, so for a bit of context, there are sort of two telomere maintenance mechanisms that are widely understood. One is the reactivation of an enzyme called telomerase, which makes sure that the telomeres stay nice and long by adding the sort of repeat sequences that you see in telomeres on again and again and again. However, I was mainly actually focused on the other mechanism, which is known as ALT, which is the alternative lengthening of telomeres mechanism, which is basically just another way of maintaining a cell maintaining its telomeres in the absence of this telomerase enzyme. So my project was looking at a subset, sort of a cohort of patients with either glioblastoma or just more widely gliomas, and seeing if we could characterize which of the two mechanisms these patients were using. I was really lucky that I was able to get some funding and be part of a much wider project, which is exploring these patients in a lot more detail. But what's going to be done is we're going to use the data I've created and also further data to see if patients in these two subsets tend to do better. So their prognosis is better if they're using telomerase over alt or vice versa, and just see if over time it could be used as a biomarker to help to better characterize the prognosis of these patients. Unfortunately, glioblastoma has got a really bad prognosis, sort of about a median survival of 15 months. So the issue is that some patients don't live to 15 months at all, whilst others can learn to live with their cancers over time. So it would be really nice if we could find a marker that we could use to sort of better prognosticate these patients. So we're trying to see if the use of these two different mechanisms to for these sort of brain cancer cells to maintain their telomeres to allow them to survive, if the use of either of those mechanisms confers a better prognosis. At the moment, that data is still ongoing. My project was mainly about characterizing the two mechanisms in the patients, but more data is coming as to how that relates to prognosis.
Wow. Um, you just made me a little speechless. I don't know. I don't know what to answer. That was really amazing, Megan. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. The practical, applications in the healthcare that you've learned from your intercalation, through your projects, while school. That was an amazing, amazing nugget you dropped there. So, do you think that your knowledge in genetics is gonna take you far in terms of your choosing a specialty in medicine? Do you think that your background in genetics could help you make a right selection? That because why I'm asking this question because I've had an amazing guest speaker who regretted the specialty she chose in medicine. She's not really feeling it because she just wanted to do it because everybody wanted to because she had a background in public health, in undergraduate. So she chose a specialty in I think is urology she chose. in medicine or something that I cannot remember just last year, and she's just facing burned out every day, and she's not really happy in the specialty she chose. So that's what I'm asking you the same question. Do you think that your background in genetics could help you choose a background that or specialty in medicine that you will not regret in the future? Tell us.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, I think it will come with practical experience of understanding the job. Um, I think knowing more about genetics as a specialty could help me to pick my jobs in the future. My experience in genetics has showed that um, it's got nice working hours compared to other specialties, and also within genetics as well. It, as I've said before, it comes into so many different specialties. So actually, genetics work can link to lots of different areas. So it allows you to get a better taster of um, different specialties and what their working lives are like. There's quite a lot of interplay with different departments and different specialties. So I think having done the course, it's a useful way to sort of get a little window into how other specialties are. But once again, I think that's going to come with experience over time. It's definitely allowed me to have a better idea of clinical genetics and oncology. But further than that, I think it will just be down to experience over time.
Hmm, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Megan. Um, so you've had a hands-on practice in terms of your prior knowledge in genetics, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like a leverage for you, in terms of choosing a specialty in medicine. So how is medicine going for you? Because medicine is really a very difficult course to do. So before I ask you the fifth question, what are the challenges you face in, your course in medicine? Just in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'd say overall, as I'm sure many medical students and other healthcare professionals doing their courses will appreciate, there's so much to learn. And I think in the 5 or 6 years that we do at university in the UK for medicine, it often just still doesn't feel like enough. I know probably the biggest challenge I've faced so far was in my early years with actually learning how to revise at university when studying medicine. There's too much to sit down and like there's too much content to just sit down and learn it all in the ways that we used to do at school. So I think the major adaptation that I've had to make when studying over the years is just focusing on sort of well evidenced techniques such as spaced repetition, just to make sure that you're covering all the content. But overall, I think it's been a really enjoyable course. And if you enjoy medicine and you enjoy learning it and you enjoy going on placement, I think it can be a really great way to learn because you're constantly learning and it takes away that cramming that you might do for other courses near to exams.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Megan. So that draws me to the fifth question. So what is your advice? What advice would you give to, other medical students that would come across this video, considering intercalating at Cardiff School of Medicine or elsewhere? So what are your advice for them?
My main advice would be to make sure that you enjoy the subject or you think you'll enjoy the subject. Before I chose to intercalate at Cardiff for genomic medicine, I spoke to people who had intercalated before or done the course at Cardiff before, and I was quite surprised. I was mixed. I was met by quite a mixture of responses. Some people had really enjoyed the course, and others hadn't. And when I tried to sort of have discussions with people and try to dig in deeper as to maybe why they enjoyed the course and why they didn't, the general trend that I found was that people that had the interest in the topic they were intercalating in really enjoyed the course, which is what I found to be the case for me now that I finished. Whereas people that were doing it, say, for the points, so in the UK, not as much anymore, but a few years ago, you could get extra sort of points on your applications to your foundation, so your first jobs and beyond, if you had got an intercalated degree. So a lot of people would intercalate mainly to get those points in those applications and less because maybe they enjoyed the subject. So my main first advice would be just make sure you enjoy the subject. Make sure it's something you enjoy. You're going to be doing it for a whole year, and you'll likely see your friends graduate medicine or get further through their medical degree, which can be challenging. So just make sure that you're happy with the reason why you're taking a year out to do it. You're really excited. That's probably my main advice. And if you do that, you should have a really good time.
I think that was an amazing advice for them. So if you're a medical student, considering to, integrate at Cardiff School of Basic Medicine or any other school, any place in the world, any university in the world, I think the advice Megan dropped is gonna help you, in the long run. So I've asked you that question about the challenges you faced during your course of study medicine thus far. So, but I didn't ask you how did you like manage those workloads and balance your medical studies while intercalating. So how did you do that? Because it is a very demanding job to do. So tell us how you managed those workloads and balanced your medical studies while intercalating. So tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that I had to balance was just my time and completing everything as part of my intercalated degree. So, um, medicine in the UK is mainly composed of exams. You don't really have too much coursework or along the way, or if you do, it's usually put at a convenient time when you haven't got as many exams. Whereas I found with this degree, I had sort of similar to school, I sort of had winter exams and summer exams and coursework sort of dotted around the way. So my main way of balancing that to start off with was just simple things like having a to-do list, having all my deadlines written down, being able to prioritize what tasks needed to be done first, and just taking everything one step at a time, trying to focus on one piece of work at a time, not thinking too much of the big picture because it can be quite overwhelming at times. Just focusing on one piece of work at a time and get through. On top of that, as you've alluded to, I had to make sure that I kept my medical knowledge up to date. So um, some of my friends intercalated in topics such as emergency medicine, which is a bit closer in terms of content to the medical course. Whereas I found as the year went on that genomics is quite far removed. Even though genomics is coming into medicine over time, there's not too much overlap between what I studied as part of my bachelor's in genomic medicine with my main medical course. So the main way that I was able to hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see in September, but hopefully the way that I was able to maintain my medical knowledge was actually to teach. So I teach as part of an organisation called OSCEazy, which is about near peer teaching. So I've been able to teach about 10 times in the year on a variety of different medical topics, from medical ethics to oncology, to OSCE revision, to students who are going through their own medical school exams. And I found that having to revise medical content in order to then be able to teach that to other people has allowed me to touch back on the medical course and make sure that I haven't forgotten it all, ready for when I start back again in September.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, how you managed those workloads and balanced your medical studies while, intercalating. That was an amazing stuff. So we've come to the last question for you. So, in what ways has intercalating at Cardiff School of Medicine enriched your overall medical education and understanding of healthcare systems, especially in the UK? Tell us.
I think the main takeaway from this year and doing a bachelor's in genomic medicine is that it has allowed me to better understand how genetics fits into so many different specialties. So beforehand, before doing the course, I had a good understanding that there was a specialty called clinical genetics, which covered some rare diseases. I didn't know which. And I didn't realize the extent to which they can, cover and help people with genetic conditions. And I was aware of the slight interplay with genetics in oncology, based on previous work I had done. However, doing this year, I've got a better understanding of how genetics is gradually over time infiltrating the whole of medicine overall, from helping us to get closer to precision medicine, where we don't treat patients as a one size fits all. We don't give every patient with the same condition the same medication, because it's not going to work for everyone in the same way, and learning how we can tailor our treatments depending on the individual themselves. And it's also helped me to understand how many different specialties are using genomic medicine as well, because it's only going to increase in its current contact with cardiology, psychiatry, pathogen genomics. It's only going to increase in number as time goes on.
Thank you so much, Megan. You've been an amazing guest speaker thus far, and we've come to the end of the session. So before we wrap up the session, what are your last words for the audience?
I would say, firstly, thank you everyone so much for listening, and just think about integration as potentially an opportunity to develop your knowledge. Don't worry if you're not 100% sure if it's something that you want to do in the future, but just give it a go. If you think it's something you enjoy, it's well worth it.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you everyone for watching. So if you love this content, do what to love, subscribe, share, like, and also share to your network. Hopefully, someone in your network will really, really love this video. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Ransom.